Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm still Judy Nathans.
And I'm newly minted Robert Winters, born
Newly
yesterday.
minted Robert. Yeah, born
Yes.
yesterday. Oh, I was born today. I meant this.
Oh, that's right. Happy birthday, Judy. Happy
Thank
birthday.
you. I know. And I'm doing this show as a gift to myself, right? No, life has to go on, and I just I bought a nice little piece of cake for myself. I didn't want to do anything with anyone.
I actually find public service to be one of the things I enjoy doing most on significant things like birthdays, because it makes me feel good. You know, it makes me feel good.
Well, so. Are we doing public service? I guess we are.
I like to think that that's fundamentally what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah. Or we're doing a public disservice. Yeah, about that. Yeah. So in the last half hour, we talked about things such as the mayoral election and a few things that sort of unfinished business of the last term. But I think right now it is wise and desirable for people to think about the future and to wonder what's coming next. We've got 2 terms. We've got 2 new city councilors joining the 7 incumbents, and there are some issues that were energized in the last council term, which will carry over, and presumably there will be some new things to come. I mean, so I hope we're not just going to basically do a complete replay of like arguing about bike lanes and missing middles.
I don't know. I don't know.
Police related matters, but some of these things are substantial, and I really you can't punt on them. Now, one of them in particular, which grew out of the lot of, I think kind of grew primarily out of summer of 2020, with the whole George Floyd phenomenon that happened across the country. Whether it was part of the defund the police, abolish the police, reform the police, doesn't much matter. Really, it's like people wanted to say, well, can we do things differently? And some people
the Republicans and everyone that voted for Mr. Who just heard it as
right.
They want to get rid of the police.
Yeah, but locally, the way we handled it, I mean, there were some people, some elected city councilors, at least one of whom is still here, were pretty much solidly of the defund state of mind. There was a task force on the future of public safety appointed by the city manager, which came up with some ideas and recommendations.
Which were presented and definitely put down by a lot of people.
Right, because there's a separate movement happening by other parties who basically fundamentally, if I may be so bold as to say, fundamentally don't believe in police. If you actually read what they initially were writing, it was our alternative methods of policing,
but that's happening across the country too. It's from communities that have been hurt by the police. You've got to put that on the table.
Right. But what's happened in places like San Francisco also is sort of they moved in one direction and they kind of drew back. And even in Minnesota, where a lot of this stuff began, they say we're going to do this, and then they pull back.
Yeah, I know.
So what's actually it's not at all clear what reform, if that's a usable word here, is really going to grow out of all of this. And I think in every community it'd be a little bit different.
Yeah, and people are trying different things that are being, because people did see a need for a change, and there's a reckoning of sorts.
In my conversations with people in the Cambridge Police Department, I think I can say without hesitation that most of the people in the Cambridge Police Department feel that there are some changes that would be good for them too.
Right. They don't want to have to go out and deal with mental health issues.
No, I mean they'll do it because it's a matter of responsibility.
That's what
they
you do.
Don't want people harmed.
911, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So and they're not eager to jettison responsibilities that might result in greater harm. So, so the question is, how do you do this in a way that's makes best use of the police department as well as best use of other parties as well? And there doesn't seem to be any great unanimity of opinion here. At least I certainly don't see it that way. But one thing I think, so there was one proposal, this alternate proposal was the acronym HEART, H-E-A-R-T,
Yeah,
which
heart,
stands
holistic
for
emergency something. Yeah,
response, something alternative response team or something like that. And that's still being, I believe the city manager, correct me if I'm wrong, came back and said, well, here's a plan we want to do cooperatively with emergency, the communications people.
It was November 17th that the city proposed their response to the HEART proposal, and that was their response. And then in December, that's when HEART presented their stuff. So
right, and there was, but there was a fair amount of political, I mean, because I get all the updates that people saying, come out and, speak in public comment and support the HEART proposal
against the city's proposal. It's true.
And
basically the city doesn't want to use the dispatch model that HEART proposed, which they wanted to completely take over. And he said, we're not going to do that. It's going to go through our police, fire, so that's part of it. The city wants to establish a Department of Community and Alternative Public Safety response, something.
I mean, there are many communities.
Notes, but the point is,
many communities have even renamed the police. They call it the Community Safety Department of the Community Safety Division.
And
so
it's
to me, that's like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's basically, what do they do? It's not so much what do you want to call them,
Okay.
I'm personally, I mean, I'll be very clear. I tend to lean more toward the city proposal, only because I think it's a much more cooperative, respectful way of interacting with the police, who, at least in Cambridge context, generally mean well.
And the funding would be $3 million for the city's proposal for their own alternative thing, and then out of that, 1.5 million, 1 to 1.5 million would be for contracted services. For example, the Black Response, or I guess the Black, I don't know. So in other words, that's how they see it. Versus, it would be a contracted service.
All right. So there's something needs to be pointed out here, which is this.
And that's what you pointed this out to me, which I didn't realize.
If there are good ideas, and I think there are some good ideas coming from a lot of people about different ways to think about this stuff.
Right.
The truth of the matter is that, under state law and under common sense, if a managed city is going to contract the services, they should go out to bid. And just because an organization says we mean well, even though we have
all this, we've got this proposal that we're giving to you,
and we have no track record at all,
right?
Then to me, it would be irresponsible, if not illegal, for the city. You have to be a qualified bidder when a city. So if there are some good ideas that says, hey, we're going to do some alternative emergency response that will involve a team of people, including people who are trained in psychological assistance, and you name it, whatever the good ideas bring, right? They have to be qualified. They really have to be qualified. You don't hire people based on political connections, good intentions, or anything like that. I mean, you're asking them to do a very important service, and they have to.
Well, they're also asking to basically give money to an organization that then will use that money to train people to be those things in the future. I mean, you can't.
Here's my question. Then, if there's $1.5 million, or basically, if I remember how the municipal procurement laws, Chapter 30B, Massachusetts general laws, what they have to say about that. If the total cost is over, it used to be something like $10,000, you actually have to put it out to bid. And you have to there's a whole process for opening the bids, based on, they have to be blind first. So you basically judge based on qualifications. You don't even look at the cost. And then there's a whole way in which this is done, and it's meant to make sure that you're not just hiring people who know somebody who's related to somebody or who happens to be part of your political constituency or anything like that. you know this is serious stuff, and I think it has to be done seriously.
Yeah.
And if this all just devolved into some kind of a slap it backslapping of
Placating
politically
with age.
motivated
I
people,
know.
then to me, I will be very
I know.
disappointed in the city manager if that
Well,
comes to be.
I mean, I think your point though about the contract things when this comes up, and also, I'm looking, everyone talked about the cahoots program and all that, and the point is they contracted years ago, 30 years ago, with the Whitebird Clinic, which had been in operation since 1969. So they were a reputable company. And yes, they have, we're talking about 30 years experience. It's not a co-response model. They were very clear to point that out. However, operate with a central dispatch. In fact, they covered the cities of Eugene and Springfield, which is about over 200,000 people. So let's not compare this city with places like Oakland, or, we are different. Do we really need, I think we do need a program that can maybe deal with people that don't feel they're getting served. But that's a different thing than immediate response and dispatch and all that. And
I'll just speak very frankly about this. I do feel that the authors of the Hart proposal have an agenda that's a bit on the hidden side, which is really that they have an issue with police, period, more so than I think that trumps their desire even to get best outcomes. So if your whole goal in putting up an alternate response mechanism here
is to keep the police out of it,
is just to keep the police out of it, whether that's helpful or not, then I think you're starting from a bad place.
Yeah.
And it will not necessarily lead to a good end. Now this is why I think I like city manager form of government normally, is that a city manager form of government would actually reason this out and like as good working professionals come up with the best plans, regardless of the politics, regardless of the movements, regardless of all of the regardless of many things, and I don't know that that's what I've been seeing. What I've been seeing here is political pressure.
And the other thing is, I saw, all the organizations that signed on supporting the Hart proposal, they're all well-meaning, the YWCA, wonderful. But I was looking, well, where are the clinics? Where are the clinicians? Where are the people that maybe are substance abuse, experts? Where are those people? Where are you going to, it's one thing to deal with service organizations, but what about the people who are going to assess and analyze and triage? Where are they? We're going to train all those people. Who's going to train those people?
Right.
That's the difference. When it's just, they definitely should exist.
Yeah.
But I think they need to prove themselves, and they want the city to do this for them. They want the city to fund it all, but leave them alone.
I'm going to throw in one other observation.
They want coordination, but they don't, I don't know.
And again, not that I want to get people hopelessly irritated by saying this, but all of the claims that this Hart proposal was community driven, that it was consulted all sorts of people, whatever.
I'm sorry.
That's a fiction. That is
I didn't
pure
even know
fiction.
about it. And I know people, know.
Most people didn't know about it.
To the community, but
and you can
and they still don't know about it.
Yeah, just because you say you're this, that, and the other thing doesn't mean it is, so this to me is like the Potemkin village. It's sort of the make-believe thing that isn't really real. And the politics is so thick in this.
It's the politically correct, and we can't go against. We can't say something against, because then we're saying it. You don't have rights, and you're less than us. That's not the issue here. I just think it has to be approached in a more, we're trying,
You know, I
but
think
I just don't trust it. I mean, I just don't trust the
before
people that,
budget, you know, because I don't know whether this is the plan is to have an appropriation request done before the regular budget cycle, or whether this is going to appear as part of the budget come April into May,
Mhm.
right? I don't know. I don't really know how they're planning to do this. But honestly, I think we are overdue for a bit of a roundtable discussion where we actually get people with
Yes,
emergency response, Cambridge
right.
Police Department and others to have a
Trained, right,
calm,
people that have done these kind of outreach things, what is
yeah,
needed and what's possible. And let's face it, a lot of the situations you're going to run into or people get called about are going to be unhoused people, might be people with multiple like substance abuse plus mental illness. Where are you going to put them? What's the other side of that? I mean, where do they go? I mean, where do they go now? So do they have there's just so much to be coordinated here and thought about. And it's just, I brought this up before. I did this in the 80s. I did this out in the suburbs. I was called out on a beeper to respond to mental. And I still can't find information about that program, but we were called out. We were all trained, social workers or psychologists, and we assessed people and we either committed them to the state hospital or we settled the situation. The police would call us to do this, so I don't know. I just feel like this is just the pressure on this to be politically, correct or, to not rub any feathers wrong or
right.
something
Well,
doesn't sit right
my
about this at all.
certainly my estimate is that this matter has to get decided in some form or another
Mhm.
before the budget hearings on the police department
Right.
happen in May.
Right.
So they're going to have to think this through
Right. So
and
we have
come
two
up with something
proposals out there on
acceptable.
the table. We have the city's proposal, and now we have the revamped kind of heart proposal. And your point, which is very interesting, is I hope people start talking about that. Well, is this going to be contracted out? Then what does that mean? Don't you have to have bidders?
If
And
there's,
there may be no other bidders. But then are they
well, that can
qualified?
happen too. That
Yeah.
can certainly happen. But the thing
Right.
is
Yeah.
just because you
Yeah.
propose some ideas doesn't mean you should be
You're
given
going
a
to get funding.
contract.
Right.
I
Right.
have an issue with that. I have a very serious issue
Well,
with that notion that,
so
because
what's
that to
the
me would
other?
be, I mean,
Right.
and then I remember there, in much more minor ways of situations, it was one former city councilor who
Mhm.
wanted to basically, derive income, would come to, basically harassing then one of the mayors back, I think when
Yeah.
Anthony Galuccio was mayor,
Okay.
basically saying, you need to contract with me here. And they basically said, we can't do things that way. You can't, just because you pressure people politically doesn't mean you should be awarded contracts. So let 30B decide this,
But what
and
about what
if there's a
also
good
the other,
idea, let the good idea rise. But
and also right? So they saying contract instead of direct money, which is what is that about the amendment, the aid to what is that called again?
well, I mean, that's just a
That-
direct aid to individuals
Right, but
or
that's
organizations.
always that's what's been brought up.
Right, it would have to
Nancy
be.
Bloa, but not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we saw that actually
Yeah.
one of the great things actually that city manager did during the pandemic, the height of the
Oh,
worst of the pandemic last year,
with the
was
funds,
making use of, because you can't just hand money out to people
No,
who mean
but they
well.
created
They
fund
did
or-
two things that was great. One was done with they repurposed the mayor's relief fund, which
right.
originally
That's
started
right,
out
was
as
for the fires, right?
that was really for a
The
fire
Berkshire
relief.
Fire, not.
It
I know
may
what you
actually
mean,
be
yeah.
predate to an even earlier one back from when
Right,
Ken Reeves
right,
was
right,
mayor.
right.
And then they revitalized it during the Berkshire Street fire, but then they repurposed it during the pandemic. And that was actually taking in money,
Yeah, I
wasn't the
gave money
tax
to
revenue
that. It was
money, but
great.
that was,
Yeah,
and
great.
the universities and, other major parties
They
were
raised
putting in
millions of
serious money.
dollars. Yeah.
That's right. So
Yeah.
they were able to actually aid businesses and individuals.
Mhm.
And we can all complain about whether it was fully equitable or
Yeah.
not, but the thing is,
Right.
in a pinch, it was pretty good to have that going,
Oh,
and give
it's
a lot of
helped so
credit
many
to the
people.
mayor Siddiqui and to the
Yep.
city manager for pulling that off. But the other thing that was really brilliantly done was how there were a lot of restaurants when they couldn't have customers, and they would all have gone belly
yeah.
up were it
Yeah.
not for the fact that some landlords were actually waiving rents, which was really helpful.
Mhm, mhm.
But the other one is the city contracted with them to actually produce food that would actually be used to support people who were in
Yeah.
hardship.
Yeah.
So that we basically, they were not
Yeah.
giving, yes, it was
Right.
taxpayer funded, but it was basically contracted services.
But wasn't it through
Yeah.
that fund or did they
No,
contract?
no, that was just directly through tax revenue. Now, some of that is actually reimbursed from federal sources and whatever, but not all of it.
Yeah.
But that was a creative way to actually help those
But
who
you just
needed
said
help.
contracted services. Did they
That's
have
right.
to bid for it though, or I don't,
It depends on the
that's a little
scale.
different,
And I
yeah.
think that actually, I think
Oh,
there may
because it
have
was
even
less
been
than a
some,
certain amount of money, yeah.
I think the state legislature also sort of, kind of made things a
Look
little
the other
easier
way,
during,
right, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
during this,
right, okay,
so to
Yeah.
allow cities and towns to do things
Yeah,
like this. So
right,
I mean, I
okay.
give a lot of credit to the city manager
Mhm.
for making all those good things happen. But this matter here, when you're talking about a substantial change to the way in which community policing happens,
Mhm,
this is not the stuff you just sort of do based on political considerations or because
mhm.
a group of people say, please fund us.
Yeah,
That's so wrong-headed. It's just almost comical,
yeah,
you know. Um, but anyway, so that's one matter that they're going to have to settle, and I think they
Yep.
have to settle it in the first 6 months of this term,
Yep.
in my
Mhm.
view. The other one, of course, as we pointed out, is they have to come to some kind of consensus about city manager,
Yeah.
and that's something that cannot be punted either. I mean, Louis DePasquale's term ends
Yeah, when
end
does
of
he
June.
officially end? June? Oh,
I believe it's
6
end of
months.
June, and
That's
I
really
don't believe, and
close. Yeah.
I suppose they could beg him to stay on, but I don't know that he's even interested in that at
Oh,
this point.
God, yeah.
You know, so
Sayonara,
that's a
yeah,
hard decision.
yeah.
And I hope to God they don't just make some sort of symbolic choice that, that sounds great and looks good in a press release. They really need somebody to manage a complicated large city,
And I
and I
think they
wish them
definitely
well.
want somebody outside of city government,
There are
it
some city
seems, but
councilors
yeah.
who feel that way, feel strongly that way.
Mhm,
I would love for them to explain that a little bit, though. I
mhm,
understand if you're talking about you don't want to have just sort of the continuation of, Bob Healy to Richie Rossi to Louis DePasquale, and you want to
mhm,
change, but that
mhm.
doesn't necessarily imply that you should just sort of have, native Canterbridgians or people in city government completely off the table. you
Yeah.
know so anyway, I wish them well, and I'll be watching, it's like a lot of other people. Another thing I maybe just mentioned, I'm sure there'll be other things, big issues that will come up that we haven't yet anticipated, but
Mhm.
we're still sort of in the process of rethinking some housing and zoning
Oh, yeah.
matters for the city. And it's unfortunate in my view that we're being somehow uh, we're having to deal with ideology more so than just simple good
Mhm.
ideas here. So whether you have the by the way, I've sort of come to the point of view that I hate anything that is identifiable as a movement. I dislike.
Right.
Whether
Yeah.
it's a stop the steal movement, a
Yeah.
la the insurrection from a year
Yeah.
ago,
Yeah.
or whether it's the YIMBYs or the density now, everything here. There
Mhm,
are good ideas to be had there, but please, can we decouple it from the movement stuff?
mhm.
You know, in my view, in Cambridge, we do have to rethink some of the way zoning works. But it's not just about, let's, bigger, taller, fatter, denser for its own
Mhm.
sake. It's a matter of what's going to work for everybody here. And
People still need their cars. Some people still need cars
and
to
some
do
people will
their
still need
work. Yeah.
transportation. It's really true. And
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 especially
when
the yeah,
when the ideologues basically try and run the circus,
yeah.
we don't really get good solutions. And then there may very well be uh, a backside of this that we're not going to be too happy about. But
Mhm.
I think it would be naive to suggest that we are not going to be hit with a lot of sort of big housing ideas in the next housing and zoning ideas. I believe the community development department is sort of in response to some of this stuff that's gone on over the last couple of years on this issue, have proposed a few possibilities for rethinking
Yeah.
one family, two family,
Mhm.
multifamily zoning
There
things.
are things that can be done that are reasonable.
Well, I think what they're
yeah.
floating again, and I may be
Yeah.
misreading this terribly, but
Mhm.
it seems like what they're doing is they're moving more toward what they call form-based zoning approach,
Mm,
which is somewhat what Somerville did, as
okay.
opposed to the strict FAR, the allowable heights, densities, whatever. So they would still have, limitations on heights, but densities would be less the issue, more
Okay.
so than building type.
Huh.
Right now, I haven't read this thing in
Yeah,
full,
I
and I
don't,
think
that's beyond me. I don't think I know much
well, I
about
think
that.
we all do need to do this here, but
Well,
but
maybe you do. I don't
but
know.
my my
I'll
only
go from you.
my hope is that we put this into the hands of thoughtful, creative,
Mhm.
collaborative, compromising kinds of people, and remove the ideology out of it.
Mm,
Because if we just have to turn this into a war, where my side's going to win, we're going to get a bad outcome,
yeah.
and that we've had enough of that. And I really hope we can do better. It's a little bit similar to sort of the issue that happened with the bicycle safety ordinance, where
Mm.
basically you sort of said, well, this is the way it's going to be, and that's
And we
that.
can't change anything. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's reduced my view about what is the primary job of a city councillor
Yeah.
in the city manager form of government. And the
Mm.
answer is to be the eyes and the ears and the temp and the thermometer of the city, to basically consult with the residents and kind of get a sense of the city. It's
Mhm.
not to impose an ideology, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
But I think we've kind of lost sight of that in the last few years, where
Well, yeah, there's been like lines are drawn, and
and people
again,
capitalize.
I think it reflects on the national picture too a little bit.
We
So we have
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, we're sort of a
I know.
little bit of the national conversation, I
Yeah,
suppose, where it's
these are hard
my
times.
ideology versus your ideology.
Yeah,
As
it's just like, I mean, look at your own family, you said, and my family, the same thing. It's like ever since 2016, things have gotten
Yeah,
worse for a lot of people.
right. But we all got to get
But
through this,
okay,
and I
I
hope that
know.
when the
We,
pandemic lifts,
hopefully we
which
will.
hopefully happen, we start to feel that
Yeah.
way in March or so,
Okay.
that maybe we can all kind of do things a little bit more
Okay, so
cooperatively in the days
we've
to
got to
come.
close out soon, so we'll be back third Tuesday, but anything coming up before then that we should,
Uh,
well, city council meeting next week,
yeah, they're
or
going to
next
be
couple
starting
weeks, yeah.
regular business
Okay,
meetings start next week. So
okay. All
anyway, we'll
right, we'll
see you
see
again
you back
soon on
then. All right,
Cambridge Inside
Cambridge
Out.
Inside Out.